Is what I'm hearing right now typical of your speech?
Yeah, this is pretty average.
Okay. What do you wish to get out of our program?
Basically, I'm happy to teach one of the sort of things I need.
Okay. What treatment have you had in the past, and what was done, and what were the results?
Child speech therapist and psychologist.
Okay, great. So now we just have you, if you could read that, please.
Anelia fiber, mimicked of vegetable or synthetic plastic nylon rope can be.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very impressive young man. Please welcome him to TEDxUW. Have fun.
So that was me exactly 1 year ago that was recorded. My entire life, I had struggled with this stutter. At some points, it was quite a bit worse than what you saw in that video. As you can see in the past year, I've made a few changes. I've started to grow a beard. But what I'm going to talk about today is the science and the facts about what speech impediments truly are, how having a speech impediment affected my life, actually how I took to mountain biking instead, and most importantly, how I went from speaking like you saw in that video to standing in front of you today and actually being an award-winning public speaker. So first we need to clear up a few myths about stuttering. Stutters have nothing to do with intelligence. It is not caused by nervousness and stress on its own, so telling someone just to take a deep breath is not going to work. And it's not contagious. A chronic speech impediment is neurological. Through brain imaging, it is shown that stutterers actually have different brain activation patterns than people who do not stutter. Some of this imagery has shown how stutterers are actually more likely to use the right hemisphere of the brain when communicating than their left hemisphere of the brain, which is commonly used with people who do not stutter and actually possesses a lot more of the fine motor skills. What this means is that although you possess the right tool for the job, and you have the instruments to make fluent speech sounds, the message in your brain is formulated, but the coordination and communication between the two and the whole system just isn't that coordinated. So what's it like from a young age to know exactly what you want to say, but not physically being able to coordinate just the movements to say it? In my case, I started having this stutter when I first learned how to speak, but it really caught up with me in grade 2. When my grade 2 teacher thought I must have a mental disability just because I spoke like this. I right away started getting treated differently. I then started feeling different about myself. And this is where the vicious cycle of stuttering begins. First, you have an experience at a young age where you stutter. This makes you uncomfortable. You'll then be nervous for the next time you have to speak. Nervousness causes tension. With tension, that makes your stuttering even worse the next time. More nervousness, more stuttering, and this continues. And for me, this continued to keep getting worse and worse for me until just this past year. One of the strange sort of tendencies about stutterers is to have almost superstitious beliefs about certain words and certain speaking situations. One of my mother's favorite examples is when I met my really good friend Taylor. And when I first met him, I really stuttered saying his name. So any person I met named Taylor, anytime I had to refer to him by his name, I was so nervous and never wanted to say it. And when I'd call his home phone and his parents would answer, instead of saying, "Hi, is Taylor home?" I'd say, "Hi, is your son home?" The problem here is he had 3 older brothers. I had to be friends with all of them. But before I get to how I managed to break this cycle, I want to tell you about what was going on in the other part of my life and the sort of coping mechanism I had to develop. So right away, at a young age, I was an outsider. I couldn't express myself with words. I didn't like to join sports teams. I didn't want to talk to friends. It was really awkward. But I would see the kids in the neighborhood mountain biking, running around and going off jumps, and I thought, this is perfect. This is something I can do that's really cool. I can meet friends, gain confidence, and never have to speak. The only problem is for the life of me, I couldn't ride a bike without training wheels. This continued until I think it was about 11. And I was so fed up, but so convinced this is going to be for me, I just went out and kept trying and trying and trying and fell about 1,006 times, I think it was. But after that, I started to get the hang of it. I could just ride the bike. And I did it every day since. Just that thrill of finally doing what I wanted to do was enough to keep me going. Now, the kind of mountain biking I do is a mix between sort of traditional mountain biking and BMX riding. And what this meant is that from the age of 10, I was flying down mountains on my bike, going up jumps and doing tricks. As you can imagine, to learn how to do what you see in that photo, I added to that 1,006 falls pretty quickly. But it didn't matter. I found that anytime I learned how to do a new jump, do a new trick, I would get that same feeling of when I first learned how to ride a bike, of doing what I wanted to do. Succeeding a challenge and reaching a goal was enough for me to keep going through the injuries and whatever it took. So I kept this up, and I really got into it. And I had this dream that if I could make a living by mountain biking, I would never need to speak and wouldn't have to worry about my stuttering ever again. And after high school, this came true. I had won several contests by this point, I had a bunch of sponsors, and I was living in Whistler, BC, getting paid to bike every day. And sure enough, I'd be standing on a podium, kids would ask me for my autograph, and I would feel great. I would not care I stuttered. But the minute I got off that podium and had an interview after a race, or those little kids and their parents would ask me a question, and I would stutter, I knew I still wasn't who I wanted to be. I could have won every mountain bike contest in the world, but I just wanted to be able to introduce myself and speak like everyone else. And this was the first step I took to being in front of here today. Just like at age 10, when I made that firm decision I would do whatever it would take to ride a bike like I wanted to, at age 18, I made the firm decision I would do whatever it would take to finally be able to speak the way I wanted to. So I moved from what I thought would be my dream life in Whistler, BC, all the way to Toronto to do what's called an intensive speech reconstructive program at the Speech and Stuttering Institute of Ontario. And what this program has is a highly broken down, highly technical way of coordinating speech muscle movements in the entire system of speaking. Where the word reconstructive comes in is that you need to totally reconstruct your existing way of speaking. In my case, 18 years of bad habits need to be reconstructed and replaced with this new way of speaking. This is a lot easier said than done. Well, I guess in my case it wasn't easier said or done, but so the first part of this program is a really intensive month, where for every single day you go into speech therapy and they teach you each step of how to form different letters, how to make different speech sounds one at a time. You go home and reinforce this through really tedious practice. Every day, every single day for a month. At this point, I had just taken my training wheels off. I was just starting to get the hang of riding a two-wheeler. I could sort of have that hope of speaking. But just like with biking, I got so thrilled by finally being able to do this that on top of my 1 hour of daily speech practice, I started speaking whenever I could, wherever I could, however I could. And this almost became like a sport for me. I was running around town, speaking to strangers, challenging myself. I would go into bars to learn how to speak to girls without getting nervous. This was a sport for me. So I kept this up, and I would feel that same feeling I did when biking. That same sense of exhilaration every time I did something new, riding that bike for the first time. And then I had another dream. Just like with biking, I started looking to professional public speakers and actors, and I actually saw my first TED Talk around this time last year. And I'm not lying when I say around that time I set my 1, 5-year, and 10-year goals, and on my 1-year goal, I wrote to do a TED Talk. So with this same exhilaration in mind, I went to acting school, and I joined Toastmasters International. where I was doing at least a speech a week, going to multiple clubs, and this literally was my mountain biking. I was doing this, feeling the same thrill, taking on different challenges. What I was able to do is I started entering the contests. And I thought, how am I going to practice for this? Same way I trained for mountain biking. Everything the same way, same feeling. I ended up able to win a couple of their contests within this. And within 6 months of doing the program, I found myself having already spoken in front of crowds of over 300 people on more than a few occasions. But before I even thought about applying this idea, the same mentality, and this process with mountain biking, I thought this was a lost cause in my life, and I would never have dreamed, nor would I have wanted to speak in front of people. But what I found is that you can often look to parts of your life where you're already successful. Think about the process you took. Think about how you feel about that, your mentality. You can often apply that to parts of your life that are completely different, which you may have already written off as your challenge areas. That's how I went from speaking like I did in that video to standing in front of you today. Thank you.